Hello there, and once again, welcome into another JayMac Snack. And today I have a really, simple question for you. Can we call Joe Biden president-elect? Is it finally time? Can we do that without people getting upset and frustrated and still calling for fraud investigations? Are we finally there? The reason I ask is because the goalpost has been moved so many times that it's hard to know if we're finally there. And if you're somebody who believes in those goalposts being moved, well, then the answer is no. You don't want him to be called president-elect yet. To anyone who is out there protesting and has been saying the media doesn't get to decide who the president is, well, I'm just curious. Way back when in 2016, when Donald J. Trump was declared the winner by the media on election night and was called president-elect from that moment forward, I'm sure that so many of you who were upset about the media calling the election for Joe Biden, I'm sure back in 2016 you were just as upset, right? Oh, yes. I'm sure that you had huge complaints back then. You hated it. How dare the media declare a winner before December 14th? Yeah. And again, hopefully I've been able to point out the slight hypocrisy or partisanship or whatever else you want to call it in this case. But we've had a couple of things happen over the last few days, and I think that we should feel pretty safe and pretty comfortable calling Joe Biden president-elect from here on out. The number one thing that happened, all 50 states certified their electoral votes. And there was not a single faithless elector. Now, you may have been hearing stories that Arizona sent their own Republican electors. Pennsylvania sent their own electors. This, my friends, is a bunch of, how do I say this politely? It's a bunch of nonsense, okay? It's a show for President Trump. These electors, these so-called, I'm doing air quotes. You can't see my air quotes if you're not watching the video, but doing the air quotes for the podcast. These so-called electors have no official capacity whatsoever. And they're not split electorals or contested electorals like so many would have you believe. The number of electors assigned to each state voted. They did not differ from their state elections, and they certified the election for Joe Biden. There is a situation where you can have a governor choose electors, and then the state legislature choose electors, and then they get split, and then you have an issue. But that's not what happened here. The legislature did not pick a new set of electors. I mean, in many of these cases, the state legislatures are not even in session. So these so-called electors are just a show. They're just writing things down on a piece of paper. There's not going to be any outcome from these so-called electors at all. It's just another pathetic way to show the president how loyal you are to him, just in case he carries political power into the future. And there are so many people, and again, I keep saying this, I don't know how to gauge what I see on social media and how much it represents a large or small portion of the people. But I can tell you from my time on social media that there is a number of people, again, I don't know how many, who believe that because of these other fake electors, that this is now a contested election. Nothing could be further from the truth. And again, it's getting embarrassing. It's getting sad. And if you don't believe me, that it's been decided, you don't have to believe me. How about believing one of the people who has been carrying Donald Trump's water for 4 years and who has refused to call the election for Joe Biden? How about we listen to the words of Mitch McConnell, shall we?
Yesterday, electors met in all 50 states. So as of this morning, our country has officially a president-elect and a vice president-elect. Many millions of us had hoped the presidential election would yield a different result. But our system of government has processes to determine who will be sworn in on January the 20th. The Electoral College has spoken. So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden. The President-elect is no stranger to the Senate. He's devoted himself to public service for many years. I also want to congratulate the Vice President-elect, our colleague from California, Senator Harris. Beyond our differences, all Americans can take pride that our nation has a female Vice President-elect for the very first time.
Wow, doesn't it kind of shock your ears now when you hear somebody being civil and reasonable in politics? Doesn't it almost jar the soul? Because we're so used to the hatred and the vitriol and the anger and the bitterness. And here we go, Mitch McConnell out of nowhere, honoring the Constitution, speaking with civility, congratulating the other side. Now, what came just before this was about 7 minutes of talking about all of the great things that President Trump did, which is fine. But he had to acknowledge. Now, don't you think that if this was a contested election, don't you think that Mitch McConnell would be talking about that? Don't you think he would be banking on that? Trying to find a way forward with that? Of course he would. Of course he would. Well, if you don't believe Mitch McConnell, how about right here in the state of Utah, another staunch supporter of President Trump, somebody who said, think of President Trump like you think of Captain Moroni. Captain Moroni is a Mormon figure in the Book of Mormon. You call him a hero in the Book of Mormon. And Senator Mike Lee got a lot of flack for that from me and other people. But that's how devoted he is to President Trump. Well, does he feel that this election is over? Well, there it is. Salt Lake Tribune. Senator Mike Lee acknowledges Joe Biden is president-elect. And let's look at the exact quote here. Absent new information that could give rise to a judicial or legislative determination altering the impact of today's Electoral College votes, Joe Biden will become President of the United States on January 20th. It's not a it's not a congratulations. It's definitely reluctant. But don't you think that if these electors were real, these fake electors, and we were in a contested election, don't you think that Mitch McConnell and Senator Lee would be holding off? This thing is done. It's donezo. And it actually has been donezo for a long time. But I've told you, I don't have a problem with legal contests. If you feel that you've been legally wronged, I don't have a problem with that. Let's do the recounts. Let's go through the court process. But the courts have overwhelmingly spoken in this case. Nothing is getting through. Nothing is getting heard. So, I mean, honestly, it's time to accept, and it's time to move on. Now, as I've told you, President Trump will never accept. He will never move on. And he claims election fraud every time he loses. I shared this with you in a JayMac Snack a day or two ago. That in 2016, when he lost the Iowa primary to Ted Cruz, that Donald J. Trump tweeted out that Ted Cruz had rigged the election. This is his go-to. This is what he does when he loses. Because he can't stand being a loser. So he's got to fabricate something to make him not be a loser. Now, if Mitch McConnell is not enough for you, if Senator Lee is not enough for you, maybe this will put it over the top. This particular politician was waiting while other world leaders had congratulated Joe Biden. This world leader was waiting. until the Electoral College decided, and even he has been forced to come out and congratulate Joe Biden.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has congratulated U.S. President-elect Joe Biden on his election victory, one day after the Electoral College confirmed that the former vice president won the 270 electoral votes required to unseat President Donald Trump.
So maybe you'll believe Vladimir. It's over. It's donezo. Now there's a last hope, right? Here comes this last-ditch hope. And it's always remarkable to me how many people become constitutional experts and election experts in the last few weeks. And they see something that matches their viewpoint, confirmation bias, and they just send it on. They forward it on. So here's the latest. Are you ready for the latest? So you've lost every court case. Wait till December 14th. You've lost the Electoral College. You lost in the Supreme Court. So now, after all of those things, we're super excited because now we're moving on to the final date. You can't call him president-elect until January 6th, when Congress certifies the electoral votes. And Mike Pence has control over that count, so he can just arbitrarily throw out electoral votes. You know, being a fact checker, it can get tiresome. I love to do it. I want to help people out so that when you see this nonsense going around, that you're armed and prepared for it. But how quickly people are ready to believe it is one of the things that is so very concerning to me. Because we're talking about how our government works. So I found this great explainer. This is from KTVB. They did a explainer about what exactly happens on January 6th so that you can get a better understanding of what the possibilities are.
And one copy is sent to the President of the Senate, Vice President Mike Pence. That copy is required by the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, which goes on to say, the President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all the certificates and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. What could still be at question, though, as we've seen with numerous rejected lawsuits since Election Day, are any number of electoral college votes from any number of swing states that some Republicans claim were decided on fraudulently. Still not proven true in any case, by the way. 20th Amendment currently requires that the newly elected House and Senate, who will be sworn in on January 3rd, convene in a joint session to count the electoral votes for president. Congress shall be in session on the 6th day of January, succeeding every meeting of the electors. The Senate and House of Representatives shall meet in the hall of the House of Representatives at the hour of 1 o'clock on that day, and the President of the Senate shall be their presiding officer. Vice President Pence will oversee that session. After going through the certified votes sent in by each state, the President of the Senate, which is Pence, shall call for objections, if any. Every objection shall be made in writing, stating clearly the reasons why, and be signed by at least one senator and one member of the House of Representatives. And if there is an objection, the two chambers will then separate, each going to their own side of the Capitol building to discuss for 2 hours whether to disqualify a state's votes. Both the Democratic-controlled House and the Republican-controlled Senate would then have to agree to toss out those votes. If there's a split decision, the tiebreaker is just to accept the votes as they were cast. But both chambers agreeing to toss out votes, well, that hasn't happened since 1824 with the election of John Quincy Adams over Andrew Jackson, who did have more electoral votes at the time. And they would also need to agree to toss out at least 36 electoral votes.
So very good explainer there. Because we have a split control in the House and the Senate, there's no way that any type of disputing of electoral votes on January 6th has an impact. As a matter of fact, depending on how the Georgia election plays out, you may not have Republican control of the Senate either. Remember, these are the newly seated members of Congress. So Georgia's election will have an impact here. But Mike Pence's only responsibility here is to count the votes out loud and declare a winner. He has no constitutional authority whatsoever to alter votes. He can't make a complaint. He can't do any of that. I mean, you think about how ridiculous it would be to set up a system where one person on the final day of certification could undo an entire vote, especially when we've had many times when the current vice president is on the ballot for president, like Al Gore. So it just would make no sense. When you have checks and balances, that just doesn't make any sense. And then the other thing that's happening is people are confusing two different events here. They're confusing what happens when one candidate doesn't get more than 270 electoral votes. So both of them fall below 270. In that case, that dispute is handled in the House. And it's not straight vote. Each state only gets one vote. That only kicks in when it's a failure of each candidate to get enough electoral college votes. People are confusing that with what happens on January 6th if somebody from the House and Senate disputes one of the state's electoral votes. In that case, both the House and the Senate vote, and they vote according to the numbers that they have. If you look at the past cases, that's very clear. So again, there are nuances here, and people they just dive in and they just think that they understand what's going on, and they have this final last hope. The last hope, the Obi-Wan Kenobi, the only hope left is January 6th. But that's already decided. The odds of getting in a situation where there are electoral votes disputed, and then the majority in the House and the majority in the Senate approve those disputes, and they do it not just for one state, but for 30 plus electoral college votes to overturn the election. If that is your final hope here, and you are banking on that, and you are celebrating on that, get ready and prepare for disappointment, because it's not going to happen. Sorry, it's just not going to happen. And recognize that at every turn, every new hope, it's like a giant game of whack-a-mole. Every new hope, you've been dashed. You've been shattered and disappointed and had to spin to justify each new loss. And there's a reason for that. And I hope those of you that are just diehard supporters and you're just so convinced that what the president is telling you is true, that there comes a point when you start to realize that the reason that you're losing and losing and losing and losing is not because of the deep state. It's not because all the judges are involved. It's not because Bill Barr was involved. It's not because the Supreme Court was involved. It's because you've been lied to. And because Donald J. Trump can't concede that he lost. And neither can you. But that is precisely what happened. And I hope that one day you'll be able to snap out of it, snap out of the haze, and look back and realize that you kind of put yourself in a place where you believed everything this man had to say. And that's dangerous. In any circumstance, that is dangerous. And hopefully we can all learn a profound lesson in the future. Hey, please take a minute. If you like this JayMac Snack and become a patron of this podcast, scan either one of those QR codes that you see on the screen. They kind of look like big Mickey ears if you're watching in video. You can't see that if you're on the podcast. But scan if you can make a monthly donation of $5 a month or more. Or scan if you can make a one-time donation. Both of those things will continue to help me bring clarity to these issues where nuance is important and where a little bit of research goes a long way. If you're not watching the video, please just click on the link in the description of this podcast wherever you are listening or watching, and you can make your donation there. With that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and I've got more JayMac Snacks coming your direction.